of Voices of the People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. For those of you who don't know, Howard Zinn was an incredibly beloved historian, activist, and former professor at Boston University. He produced incredible work during his lifetime, with one of the most well-known and influential being A People's History of the United States, which was used to further compile Voices of the People's History of the United States. In writing these books, Howard Zinn honored the voices of those ignored, exploited, and forgotten by history. He showed us our country through the eyes of women, African Americans, Native Americans, immigrants, and laborers. Tonight, we hope to bring these voices to life. The following performance will consist of 11 monologues spanning from 1890 to 2006. If you feel moved, excited, or pissed at any of these monologues, as we hope you do, we urge you to show it. We are here to demonstrate that the voices of the oppressed matter. We are here to make sure that Howard Zinn's legacy is upheld, especially at Boston University, where his impact is still tangible today. We are here to remind you of just how accurate Zinn was when he said that to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presence, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory. We dedicate this performance to Howard Zinn.
The mechanization of farming in the late 19th century forced small farmers to borrow money to pay for equipment. When they could not pay, their farms were taken away. They began to organize, first in farmers' alliances, North and South, black and white, and then came together in the populist movement to fight the banks and the railroads that they saw as their enemies. The movement ultimately fell apart after it threw its support to the Democratic candidate William Jennings Bryan in the 1896 election, but its influence lasted long after. One of its most respected leaders, Mary Elizabeth Lease of Kansas, presents the ideas of the movement.
This is a nation of inconsistencies. The Puritans, fleeing from oppression, became oppressors. We fought England for our liberty and put chains on 4 million of blacks. We wiped out slavery, and our tariff laws and national banks began a system of white wage slavery worse than the first. Wall Street owns the country. It is no longer a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but a government of Wall Street, by Wall Street, and for Wall Street. The great common people of this country are slaves, and monopoly is the master. The West and the South are bound and prostrate before the manufacturing East. Money rules, and our vice president is a London banker. Our laws are the output of a system which clothes rascals in robes and honesty in rags. The political parties lie to us, and the political speakers mislead us. We were told 2 years ago to go to work and to raise a big crop. That was all that was needed. While we went to work and plowed and planted, the rains fell, the sun shone, and nature smiled, and we raised that big crop they told us to. And what came of it? 8-cent corn, 10-cent oats, 2-cent beef, and no price at all for the butter and eggs. That's what came of it. The politicians said we suffered from overproduction. Overproduction. When 10,000 little children, so statistics tell us, starve to death every year in the United States, and over 100,000 shop girls in New York are forced to sell their virtue for the bread their niggardly wages deny them. We want money, land, transportation. We want the abolition of the national banks, and we want the power to make loans direct from the government. We want the foreclosure system wiped out. We will stand by our homes and stay by our firesides by force if necessary, and we will not pay our debts to the loan shark companies until the government pays its debts to us. The people are at bay. Let the bloodhounds of money who dogged us thus far beware.
Goldman was an anarchist and feminist orator, agitator, and organizer. She was jailed many times for her speeches. She was also an outspoken critic of war. When she and fellow anarchist Alexander Berkman spoke out against the draft in 1917, they were imprisoned, and after the war they were deported to Russia, their country of origin. She gave this speech in San Francisco in the period leading up to the outbreak of the First World War.
What is patriotism? Is it love of one's birthplace, the place of childhood's recollections and hopes, dreams and aspirations? Is it the place where, in childlike naivete, we would watch the fleeting clouds and wonder why we too could not run so swiftly? The place where we would count the myriad glittering stars, terror-stricken lest each one and I should be piercing the very depths of our little souls? Is it the place where we would listen to the music of the birds and long to have wings to fly, even as they, to distant lands? Or is it the place where we would sit at mother's knee enraptured by wonderful tales of great deeds and conquest? In short, is it love for the spot, every inch representing dear and precious recollections of a happy, joyous, and playful childhood? If that were patriotism, few American men of today could be called upon to be patriotic, since the place of play has been turned into factory, mill, and mine, while deafening sounds of machinery have replaced the music of the birds. Nor can we longer hear the tales of great deeds, for the stories our mothers tell today are but those of sorrow, tears, and grief. What, then, is patriotism? Patriotism, sir, is the last resort of scoundrels, said Dr. Johnson. Leo Tolstoy, the greatest anti-patriot of our times, defines patriotism as a principle that will justify the training of wholesale murderers, a trade that requires better equipment for the exercise of man-killing than the makings of such necessities of life, such as shoes, clothing, and houses, a trade that guarantees better returns and greater glory than that of the average working man. Indeed, conceit, arrogance, and egotism are the essentials of patriotism. Let me illustrate. Patriotism assumes that our globe is divided into little spots, each one surrounded by an iron gate. Those who have had the fortune of being born on some particular spot consider themselves better, nobler, grander, more intelligent than the living beings inhabiting any other spot. It is therefore the duty of everyone living on that chosen spot to fight, kill, and die in the attempt to impose his superiority upon all the others. The inhabitants of the other spots reason in like manner, of course, with the result that from early infancy the mind of the child is poisoned with blood-curdling stories about the Germans, the French, the Italians, the Russians. When the child has reached manhood, he is thoroughly saturated with the belief that he is chosen by the Lord himself to defend his country against the attack or invasion of any foreigner. It is for that purpose that we are clamoring for a greater army, a greater navy, more battleships, more ammunition. An army and navy represent the people's toys. To make them more attractive and acceptable, hundreds and thousands of dollars are being spent for the display of these toys. That was the purpose of the American government in equipping a fleet and sending it along the Pacific coast, that every American citizen should be made to feel the pride and glory of the United States. The city of San Francisco spent $100,000 for the entertainment of the fleet. Los Angeles, $60,000. Seattle and Tacoma, $100,000. To entertain the fleet, did I say? To dine and wine a few superior officers, while the brave boys had to mutiny to get sufficient food. Yeah, $260,000 were spent on fireworks, theater parties, and revelries at a time when men, women, and children through the length and breadth of this country were starving in the streets, when thousands of unemployed were ready to sell their labor at any price. $260,000. What could not have been accomplished with such an enormous sum? But instead of bread and shelter, the children of those cities were taken to see the fleet, that it may remain, as one newspaper said, a lasting memory for the child. A wonderful thing to remember, is it not, the implements of civilized slaughter? If the mind of the child is to be poisoned with such memories, what hope is there for a true realization of human brotherhood? We Americans claim to be a peace-loving people. We hate bloodshed. We are opposed to violence, yet we go into spasms of joy over the possibility of projecting dynamite bombs from flying machines upon helpless citizens. We are ready to hang, electrocute, or lynch anyone who from economic necessity will risk his own life in the attempt upon that of some industrial magnate. Yet our hearts swell with pride at the thought that America is becoming the most powerful nation on earth, and that it will eventually plant her iron foot on the necks of all other nations. Such is the logic of patriotism. Thinking men and women the world over are beginning to realize that patriotism is too narrow and limited a conception to meet the necessities of our time. The centralization of power has brought into being an international feeling of solidarity among the oppressed nations of the world. A solidarity which fears not foreign invasion, because it is bringing all the workers to the point when they will say to their masters, "Go and do your own killing. We have done it long enough."
One of the most important and earliest voices against World War I was Helen Keller. In our schools, we learn about Helen Keller, the deaf and blind girl who became a famous writer. But we do not learn that she was a socialist and an agitator. Here is the speech Keller delivered before the U.S. entry into the First World War in 1917.
Every modern war has had its root in exploitation. The Civil War was fought to decide whether slaveholders of the South or the capitalists of the North should exploit the West. The Spanish-American War decided that the United States should exploit Cuba and the Philippines. The South African War decided that the British should exploit the diamond mines. The Russo-Japanese War decided that Japan should exploit Korea. The present war is to decide who shall exploit the Balkans, Turkey, Persia, Egypt, India, China, Africa. And we are whetting our sword to scare the victors into sharing their spoils with us. Now the workers are not interested in the spoils. They will not get any of them anyway.
The preparedness propagandists have still another object, and a very important one. They want to give the people something to think about besides their own unhappy condition. They know the cost of living is high, wages are low, employment is uncertain, and will be much more so when the European call for munitions stops. No matter how hard and incessantly the people work, they often cannot afford the comforts of life. Many cannot obtain the necessities. Every few days, we are given a new scare to lend realism to their propaganda. They have had us on the verge of war over the Lithuania, the Gulf Flight, the Ancona, and now they want the working men to become excited over the sinking of the Persia. The working man has no interest in the sinking in any of these ships. The Germans might sink every vessel on the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea and kill Americans with every one. The American working man would still have no reason to go to war. All the machinery of the system has been set in place. Above the complaint and din of the protest from the workers is heard the voice of authority. "Friends," it says, "fellow patriots, workers, your country is in danger. There are foes on all sides of us. There is nothing between us and our enemies except the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean. Look at what has happened to Belgium. Consider the fate of Serbia. Will you murmur about low wages when your country, your very liberties, are in jeopardy? What are the miseries you endure compared to the humiliation of having a victorious German army sail up the East River? Quit your whining, get busy, and prepare to defend your firesides and your flag. Get an army, get a navy, be ready to meet the invaders like the loyal-hearted freemen you are." Will the workers fall into this trap? Will they be fooled again? I'm afraid so. The people have always been amenable to oratory of this sort. The workers know they have no enemies except their masters. They know that their citizenship papers are no warrant for the safety of themselves or their wives or their children. They know that honest sweat, persistent toil, and years of struggle bring them nothing worth holding on to, worth fighting for. Yet deep down in their foolish hearts, they believe they have a country. O blind vanity of slaves. The clever ones up in high places know how childish and silly the workers are. They know that if the government dresses them up in khaki and gives them a rifle and starts them off with a brass band and waving banners, they will go forth to fight valiantly for their country. They are taught that brave men die for their country's honor. What a price to pay for abstraction. The lives of millions of young men, other millions crippled and blinded for life, the existence made hideous for still more millions of human beings, the achievement and inheritance of generations swept away in a moment, and nobody better off for all that misery. This terrible sacrifice would be comprehensible if the thing you die for and call country fed and clothed, housed and warmed you, cherished and educated your children. I think the workers are the most unselfish of the children of men. They toil and live and die for other people's country, other people's sentiments, other people's liberties, other people's happiness. The workers have no liberties of their own. They are not free when they are compelled to work 12 or 10 or 8 hours a day. They are not free when they are ill-paid for their exhausting toil. They are not free when their children must labor in mines, mills, and factories, or starve, and when their women may be driven by poverty to lives of shame. They are not free when they are clubbed and imprisoned because they go on strike for a raise of wages and for elemental justice. That is their right as human beings. We are not free unless the men who frame and execute the laws represent the interests of the people and no other interest. The ballot does not make a free man out of a wage slave.
There has never existed a truly free and democratic nation in the world. From time immemorial, men have followed with blind loyalty the strong men who have had the power of money and armies. Even while battlefields were piled high with their own dead, they have tilled the lands of the rulers and have been robbed of the fruits of their labor. They have built palaces and pyramids, temples and cathedrals that held no real shrine of liberty. It is your business to see that no child is employed in an industrial establishment or mine or store, and that no worker is needlessly exposed to accident or disease. It is your business to make them give you clean cities free from smoke, dirt, and congestion. It is your business to make them pay you a living wage. It is your business to see that this kind of preparedness is carried into every department of the nation until everyone has the chance to be well-born, well-nourished, rightly educated, intelligent, and serviceable to their country at all times. Strike against all ordinances and laws and institutions that continue the slaughter of peace and the butcheries of war. Strike against war, for without you, no battles can be fought. Strike against manufacturing shrapnel and gas bombs and all other tools of murder. Strike against preparedness that means death and misery to millions of human beings. Be not dumb, obedient slaves in an army of destruction. Be heroes in an army of construction.
And uncompromising voices against World War I was that of Eugene Debs, the railroad union organizer and leader of the Socialist Party. On June 18, 1918, he addressed a mass rally of workers in Ohio, knowing full well that his words could lead to his arrest and imprisonment. And they did. Debs was found guilty by the jury of violating the Espionage Act, which made it a crime to obstruct the recruitment or enlistment service. His sentence of 10 years was upheld by a unanimous Supreme Court. Here is the speech that led to his arrest.
They would have you believe that the Socialist Party consists in the main of disloyalists and traitors. It is true in a sense, not at all to their discredit. We frankly admit that we are disloyalists and traitors, to the real traitors of this nation, to the gang that on the Pacific Coast are trying to hang Tom Mooney and Warren Billings, in spite of their well-known innocence, and to the protest of practically the entire civilized world. Every solitary one of these aristocratic conspirators and would-be murderers claims to be an arch-patriot. Every one of them insists that war is being waged to make the world safe for democracy. What rot. What humbug. What false pretense. These tyrants, these autocrats, these red-handed robbers and murderers, the patriots, while the men who have the courage to stand face to face with them, speak the truth, and fight for their exploited victims, they are the disloyalists and traitors. If this be true, I want to take my place, side by side, with the traitors in this fight. How stupid and short-sighted the ruling class really is. Cupidity is blind. It has no vision. The greedy profit-seeking exploiter cannot see beyond the end of his nose. He sees a chance for an opening. He knows what graft is and where it is and how it can be secured, but vision he has none, not the slightest. He knows nothing of the great throbbing world that spreads out in all directions. He has no capacity for literature, no appreciation of art, no soul for beauty. That is the price, the penalty, the parasites pay for the violation of the laws of life. The Rockefellers are blind. Every move they make in their game of greed but hastens their own doom. Every blow they strike at the socialist movement reacts upon themselves. Every time they strike at us, they hit themselves. It never fails. Every time they strangle a socialist paper, they add 1,000 voices proclaiming the truth of the principles of socialism and the ideals of the socialist movement. They help us in spite of themselves. They have always taught and trained you to believe it to be your patriotic duty to go to war and to have yourself slaughtered at their command. But in all the history of the world, you, the people, have never had a voice in declaring war, and strange as it certainly appears, no war in any nation, in any age, has ever been declared by the people. And here, let me emphasize the fact, and it cannot be repeated too often, that the working class who fight all the battles, the working class who make the supreme sacrifices, the working class who freely shed their blood to furnish their corpses, have never yet had a voice in either declaring war or making peace. It is the ruling class that invariably does both. They alone make war, and they alone make peace. Yours not to reason why, yours but to do and die. That is their motto, and we object on the part of the awakening workers of this nation. If war is right, let it be declared by the people. You who have your lives to lose, you certainly above all others have the right to decide the momentous issue of war or peace.